I woke up to another quiet morning in my house, a place that, over the years, had grown colder, lonelier, and more distant from the life I once knew. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen as I prepared my usual solitary breakfast. The coffee brewed slowly, and I found myself staring at the empty chair across from mine. I hadn't really looked at that chair in a long time, not since she passed. Margaret had been my wife for 32 years, and after her death, everything seemed to fade into gray. It wasn't just the absence of her presence, it was the feeling that the world around me had become something I could no longer reach. My son, Ryan, had moved out years ago after a long, drawn-out argument about his future. The final rift came when he decided to marry someone I couldn't approve of. Someone who, in my opinion, was more interested in his money than his happiness. Since then, the lines of communication had become increasingly sparse. A few birthday cards here and there, an occasional text, but never anything that truly bridged the gap between us. The silence stretched between us like a canyon too wide to cross. As I poured my coffee, I felt a weight in my chest. It wasn't just the coffee or the morning, it was everything. The weight of the years that had gone by, the weight of the things unsaid, the weight of the relationship that had become so estranged, it felt impossible to repair. I wasn't sure how much longer I could carry it. The house had become a museum of memories. On the mantel above the fireplace sat our family pictures. There was one of Ryan and me at his high school graduation, both of us beaming with pride. I used to look at it and remember how proud Margaret and I were, how we felt like we could conquer the world. But now, it felt like a reminder of what was lost. It made my chest tighten every time I glanced at it. It's funny, isn't it, how life can change in the blink of an eye. And in the years that follow, you can convince yourself that nothing could ever be the same again. I had convinced myself that maybe this was it, that our family story was over and it was just time to move on. But even now, sitting here in the quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that something in me, in my life, was still out of place. My thoughts were interrupted by the shrill ring of my phone. It was an unfamiliar number. And for a moment, I hesitated. Who could it be? A telemarketer. Another spam call. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer it. Hello? My voice sounded foreign to me, rough and hesitant, as though I hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. Dad. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it was different somehow. Softer. More uncertain. Ryan. Yeah. It's me. I know it's been a while, he said, the words trailing off as if he wasn't sure what to say next. I didn't know what to say either. The silence between us was heavy, like a physical presence. Years of silence. I cleared my throat, trying to push through the awkwardness. I wasn't expecting to hear from you, I said, my tone more blunt than I intended. I know, Ryan replied quickly. It's just, well, I've been thinking a lot about things lately. About us. About family. The word family hung in the air between us like a fragile thing, as if it might shatter if either of us spoke too loudly. I hadn't expected this. After everything, after all the anger and hurt, it seemed impossible that we could just pick up where we left off. I miss you, Dad, he continued, his voice quieter now. I've been thinking about the times we had, and I want to fix things. I want us to be family again. I sat down slowly, the phone still pressed to my ear. My heart was pounding in my chest, not from excitement, but from something else, something raw and painful. Could I really do this? Could I really allow myself to open up again? To forgive? I thought about Margaret. She would have known what to say. She always did. She would have known how to bring us back together. Maybe, just maybe, she was right about one thing, that families could find their way back to each other. Maybe it wasn't too late. Okay, I said, before I could second-guess myself. When, tonight? It's short notice. I know, but we're having dinner. And Emma's making that pot roast you always loved. I want us to talk. Really talk. There it was again. Family. And the way he said it, so earnest. So vulnerable. It was as if he was reaching out, trying to pull me back from the edge of the world we'd created. I'll be there, I said, before I even realized what I was agreeing to. What time? 7:30. I'll send you the address. We moved to Montclair last year. It's a bit of a drive, but I'll text you everything. All right, I said, still in a daze. I'll be there. After I hung up, I stood there for a moment, still holding the phone in my hand, staring at nothing in particular. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I had just made a decision I couldn't take back. I felt something stir in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, a fragile, delicate hope that maybe, just maybe, this dinner would be the beginning of something new. I turned to look at the family photo on the side table, the one with Ryan and me at his wedding. Margaret's smiling face was there too, frozen in time, her expression so full of love. I could almost hear her voice, as if she were standing right beside me, whispering, "It's time, James. It's time to come home." I felt my throat tighten, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe it could be true. Tonight could be different. Tonight, I could have my son back. The day passed slowly. My mind raced with questions and doubts. What had changed? Why now? And, most importantly, could I trust that this wasn't just another attempt to manipulate me? The last time we had spoken, Ryan had stormed out, furious that I refused to lend him money for his business idea. I'd tried to explain, but he had left anyway, not looking back. So why was he reaching out now? As the clock ticked closer to 7:30, I found myself getting ready with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I selected my best suit, an old navy one Margaret had bought for me for Ryan's graduation. She always said it was important to dress for special occasions. You need to look the part, she'd said, smoothing the lapels as she fussed over me. I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting the tie and brushing off any signs of wear. It still fit well, although a little looser than it had when I first wore it. As I examined my reflection, I couldn't help but notice the lines on my face, the silver in my hair. I looked older than I felt. Would Ryan notice? Would Emily even recognize the man standing in front of her? I wasn't sure what I was walking into tonight. But I knew one thing for certain. I was willing to try. I was willing to see if we could rebuild something from the ashes of our broken family. With a final glance in the mirror, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I was going to take the first step toward healing. Tonight, I was going to have dinner with my son. And maybe, just maybe, I would get my family back. As I sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the quiet street in front of my house, I found myself caught between two worlds. On one side, the world I had known for decades, the world where I had a wife, tout son, a home full of laughter and love. On the other, to the world I had created since Margaret passed, a world of solitude, silence, and self-imposed exile from the people who had once meant everything to me. The invitation to dinner had come out of nowhere. It was unexpected. Too much time had passed for me to think it was a mere coincidence. A year had gone by since the last time I'd spoken to Ryan, and even then, it was only a brief and heated exchange. The argument had been over money. Of all things, he had been desperate, trying to get me to lend him a large sum for what he called a business investment. I had refused. Of course, Margaret would have known how to handle the situation better. But I was firm. Too firm, perhaps. She always knew the right words to say. The gentle touch to mend the fraying bonds between us. I, on the other hand, was all anger, all pride. After that argument, Ryan had walked out, slamming the door behind him, and we had never truly spoken again. The silence had stretched between us like an ocean, vast and cold. I had convinced myself that this was the way things would remain. After all, how could I let myself forgive him? How could I forgive someone who had hurt me so deeply? Someone who had seemed to care more about his ambitions than his family. But now, here I was, staring at my phone with Ryan's name on the screen. The years of silence had weighed on me so heavily that I hadn't been sure what to expect when I answered. But when I heard his voice, it was like a door had opened that I hadn't known existed. The words, "I miss you," Dad hit me with a force that I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a confession, an apology, a plea. And it was enough to make me question everything I had believed about our relationship. I couldn't help but think about Margaret. She would have known what to do, what to say. She had always been the glue that held everything together. And now that she was gone, I was left to navigate the storm of my emotions on my own. I had spent months in a fog of grief and regret. And now, for the first time in a long while, I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to make things right. The invitation to dinner was not just an offer of food. It was a chance to rebuild something that had been broken for too long. Ryan wanted us to talk, to really talk like we used to. He didn't just want a reunion, he wanted reconciliation. That was a lot to ask, especially after everything that had happened. But I found myself agreeing before I even realized what I was doing. What was I so afraid of? I asked myself. Was I really willing to let years of silence dictate my future? Was I going to let pride and stubbornness be the last words between me and my son? Margaret always said that families could find their way back to each other, given time. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to take the first step forward. The day dragged on slowly after the phone call, each hour ticking by like a drumbeat that grew louder the closer it got to 7:30. I found myself pacing around the house, picking up random items and putting them back down again, unable to settle into any of the familiar routines I had built over the last year. I glanced at the clock on the wall, and then at the family photo on the side table, the one of me, Margaret, and Ryan at his wedding. I hadn't looked at it in months, but now it felt like a window into the past. A reminder of what had once been. I wondered what Ryan was feeling. Was he nervous? Too. Did he wonder if I would show up? Did he question whether this was the right time? I couldn't help but think that maybe he was just as afraid as I was, afraid of opening old wounds, afraid of what might happen when the walls we had built around ourselves came crashing down. As I pulled on my jacket and prepared to leave, I found myself caught between excitement and fear. The world outside seemed to have shifted in those few moments since I'd agreed to go. My house, which had once felt too big and empty, now seemed too small. I looked at the pictures of Margaret on the wall, the perfume bottle she had left on the dresser, still sitting there untouched. She had always been the one to bring people together, to smooth over the rough edges. I wasn't sure I could do that without her. But maybe I didn't have to do it alone. Maybe this was the start of something new. I grabbed my keys and locked the door behind me. Stepping into the cool evening air, the streets of my neighborhood were quiet, the houses lining the block still and peaceful. As I walked toward my car, I couldn't help but think about the dinner ahead. Would it be awkward? Would we even be able to talk without all the tension that had built up over the years? Or would it be something else entirely, something more profound? More healing than I had ever imagined. I drove slowly, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. Montclair was a half-hour drive from my neighborhood, and as I passed through the familiar streets, I found myself thinking about how far I had come in the past year. My life had been reduced to a series of routines, small and predictable, until today. Now, I was heading towards something I couldn't predict. A dinner with my son, a chance to talk, a chance to finally break the silence. The further I drove, the more surreal it felt. I hadn't been to Montclair in years, not since Ryan had moved away after he got married. I couldn't help but wonder what his life was like now, living in this affluent suburb. How had he changed? What had happened in the time we'd been apart? And what about Emma? I'd only met her a few times, but she had always seemed distant. What kind of relationship did they have now? As I neared Montclair, I passed the large houses and manicured lawns, feeling the contrast between my modest home and the luxurious surroundings. It was clear that Ryan had done well for himself, but something in my gut told me that success might not always be what it seemed. Was he truly happy, or was this just the outward appearance of a life that was, on the inside, as broken as mine had been? When I finally pulled up to their house, I was struck by the grandeur of it. The large stone pillars at the entrance, the expansive driveway, to the fountain out front. It was like something out of a magazine. It was beautiful. Yes, but it felt cold, unwelcoming. The kind of house you walked into and immediately knew that it wasn't a home. Not really. It was a show, a performance, a façade. I got out of the car and made my way up the driveway, my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. The door opened before I even had a chance to knock, and there stood Ryan, dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the successful man he had become. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something in his eyes, something that made me wonder if he was as uncertain as I was. "Dad," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and nervousness. "You made it. I wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile. "It's been a while." He stepped aside, ushering me into the grand foyer of the house. As I crossed the threshold, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something much bigger than a simple dinner. It was as if I was entering a new chapter of our lives, one that neither of us knew how to navigate. But we were both here, ready to begin, ready to talk, ready to heal. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this dinner could be the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to find our way back to each other, to reclaim the family we had lost. As I stepped over the threshold of Ryan's house, a strange feeling washed over me. The grand foyer, with its polished marble floors and expensive artwork adorning the walls, felt foreign in a way I couldn't quite place. This was no longer the house of my son, not the boy who had once run around in our small home, laughing, full of life. No, this was a space built for success, for appearances, the kind of house that whispered of wealth and power, but not of warmth or love. I had to remind myself that the boy who had grown up in my home, with all his imperfections, still lived here somewhere, though it was hard to see him now in this opulent space. Ryan stood there, dressed sharply in a suit that looked too expensive to belong in the same room as my worn-out jacket. He smiled, his face lighting up as he saw me. But there was an edge to the smile. Something I couldn't quite read. His eyes, those familiar eyes I had once gazed into every day, seemed a little too eager, a little too rehearsed. "Dad," he said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "You made it. I wouldn't miss it," I replied, my words feeling hollow in my own mouth. "It's been a while." The moment stretched between us, neither of us sure what to do or say next. There was a history between us, the years of anger and silence that couldn't be erased by a simple dinner invitation. Yet here I was, standing in his home, hoping that this dinner would somehow bring us back together, that maybe, just maybe, we could break through the wall that had kept us apart for so long. Ryan stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Please, come in. Emma's just finishing up dinner. We're really glad you could make it." As I walked through the house, my eyes caught fleeting glimpses of the life they had built. Here, pictures on the walls, the gleam of luxury, the way everything seemed so meticulously arranged. It all seemed perfect. Too perfect. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy, a bitter ache in my chest as I thought of the life I had left behind in Brooklyn. The simplicity, the love, the warmth of home. This house, with its grand staircase and fine furniture, couldn't hold a candle to the life Margaret and I had built together. As we made our way through the hallway, I was struck by the silence. The house was beautiful, but it felt like something was missing. The hum of life, the laughter, the chaos that comes with living in a real home, it was all absent. And I wondered if this perfection, this pristine image of wealth, was a fade. Was this really the life Ryan wanted? Was this really who he had become when we reached the dining room? I paused for a moment in the doorway. The table was set for 4, gleaming with fine china and crystal glasses. The light from the chandelier overhead made the room look almost ethereal. The delicate silverware arranged with military precision. It was beautiful. Yes, but there was something unsettling about it. It felt like a performance, like a stage set for a play. And I was the guest star, who had no idea what role I was supposed to be playing. Ryan had already taken his seat at the head of the table, and Emma, dressed in a silk dress that shimmered under the light, stood beside him, a smile plastered on her face. She was everything I had expected, perfectly composed, immaculate, a vision of elegance. But underneath that smile, I couldn't help but wonder, was she really happy? Was this really the life she had envisioned, or was she just as trapped in this gilded cage as Ryan seemed to be? "Dad, please, sit down," Ryan said, his voice eager, almost too eager. I couldn't tell if it was genuine excitement or if he was just trying to fill the silence that lingered between us. I walked slowly toward the chair at the head of the table, my movements deliberate. As I lowered myself into the chair, I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. This was supposed to be a reconciliation, a chance to mend old wounds, but the atmosphere in the room felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. My mind raced back to the phone call, to the warning I had received. Was I really safe here? Was this dinner a genuine attempt at healing? Or was there something else at play? Emma poured a glass of wine for me, her smile never faltering as she handed it over. "We've been thinking a lot about you, James," she said, her voice sweet but laced with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite pinpoint. "We really want to make things right, don't we?" Ryan's eyes flicked to hers for a brief moment, an almost imperceptible look passing between them. I couldn't place it, but something about their interaction felt rehearsed, too perfect, too calculated. "Yes, we do," Ryan said, his voice tight. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we've been through, and I know we've had our differences, but I want to make things right. I want to be a family again. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with expectation. I felt the weight of them, and for a moment, I almost believed him. Maybe this was it. Maybe this dinner really was a chance for us to heal, to start over. But as I looked at Ryan, really looked at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. He had changed. I had changed, but not in the ways we had hoped. The conversation started off innocuously enough. We talked about work, about the weather, about the mundane things that people discuss when they are trying to fill the silence. But it wasn't long before I noticed that their questions began to take on a different tone. Emma, in particular, seemed overly interested in my business, in my plans for the future, in my thoughts on succession planning. James, have you thought about what you're going to do with the restaurant? I mean, you're getting older, and I'm sure you don't want to be running things forever. Right? Emma asked, her tone light, but pointed. The question caught me off guard, and I found myself frowning slightly as I tried to process her words. I'm not thinking about retiring just yet, I replied, my voice steady but defensive. There's still a lot I want to do. But Emma didn't seem satisfied with that answer. She pressed further, her questions growing more specific, more probing. But don't you think it's time to start thinking about who will take over? You've built something incredible, but it's not going to last forever. James, what will happen when you're gone? I glanced at Ryan, who seemed unusually quiet. His eyes were focused on his glass, his hand tapping nervously against the rim. I felt a pang of unease. Why was this conversation taking such a turn? Why were they suddenly so interested in my business? Look, I haven't given it much thought, I said, my voice firmer now. I'm still in control, and I don't plan on giving it up anytime soon. Ryan, who had been unusually silent up until this point, suddenly spoke up. Dad, I think what Emma means is that maybe it's time to start making some plans. You know, for the future. We don't want you to worry about things like that on your own. I nodded slowly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their concern felt too rehearsed, too perfect. I had spent enough years in business to know when someone was angling for something, and right now, Ryan and Emma seemed like they were trying to angle for something, though I wasn't sure what. I took a deep breath and sipped my wine, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. The conversation drifted back to more neutral topics, but the tension in the air didn't dissipate. I kept thinking back to the warning I had received earlier. Someone had told me to leave, to walk away from this dinner. They had told me I was in danger, but I hadn't listened. Now, I wasn't so sure I had made the right choice. The meal was served pot roast, just as Ryan had promised, and it was as delicious as I remembered. The flavors were rich, familiar, comforting, and yet, as I chewed, I couldn't help but wonder how much of this was real, how much of this was a genuine attempt to reconnect, and how much of it was part of a plan I couldn't yet see. I caught Ryan glancing at me from across the table, his expression unreadable. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. It was there, just beneath the surface, and in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This dinner, this reunion, wasn't what it seemed. I had to be careful. Something wasn't right, and I needed to stay alert. The tension in the air grew thicker as the evening wore on. The meal, though delicious, was no longer a source of comfort. Each bite I took felt heavy, like I was eating, not just the food on my plate, but the years of silence, of regret, of strained memories. As I chewed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Every word that came from Ryan and Emma's lips, every polite gesture, every perfectly timed laugh, it all felt like a performance. It felt rehearsed, practiced, as if they were actors playing roles they had learned over the years, but never fully understood. The conversation drifted from the mundane to the more personal, but there was a sharp edge to it now, an undercurrent that I couldn't ignore. Emma, as gracios a saber, seemed to be steering the discussion with an almost surgical precision. Her questions weren't just casual, they were probing, specific, and increasingly uncomfortable. So, James, Emma began again, her smile never faltering. Have you thought about what happens to the restaurant when you can no longer run it? It's a big business. I'm sure you've got some sort of plan. Right. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between me and Emma. It was clear that he was trying to keep the conversation light, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. He cleared his throat, as if to cover up the growing awkwardness in the room. Yeah, Dad, he chimed in, his voice a little too smooth, a little too calculated. You've done so much for the business. But I think it's time to think about the future. I've been looking into some real estate opportunities. And I cut him off, my patience wearing thin. What are you getting at? Ryan, there was a pause. The question hung in the air between us, thick with unspoken meaning. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and I could feel the weight of their silence pressing down on me. My heart beat a little faster as I realized that the conversation was veering into unfamiliar territory. It wasn't just about my business or my future. It was about something else entirely. Ryan and Emma exchanged a glance, one that was too quick to be natural, too rehearsed. My suspicions deepened. Dad, we just want to make sure you're taken care of, Ryan said, his voice soft but insistent. You've worked so hard for so long, and you deserve to have some peace of mind. Emma and I were talking about, well, about taking over the restaurant, maybe managing it for you. You've got to think about retirement. Right. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. They had been circling this for the entire evening. And now it was clear. This wasn't a simple family dinner. This wasn't just a chance for reconciliation. This was about control. They weren't interested in rekindling a relationship. They were interested in my business. I set my fork down slowly, my hand suddenly feeling cold. You're trying to take over, aren't you? I asked, my voice steady but sharp. Ryan flinched, and Emma's smile faltered for the briefest of moments. What are you talking about? Dad, Ryan said, his voice too high, too defensive. We just want to help you. We're family. Family doesn't take over someone else's business without asking, but I replied, my words coming out more forcefully than I intended. You've been talking about my future for the entire evening. And I'm not a fool. You're not asking to help. You're asking to control. The words hung in the air, and I could feel the temperature in the room drop. Ryan looked at me, his face an unreadable mask, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. Emma, too, seemed unnervingly calm, her gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. I don't know what you're implying, Emma said, her voice smooth and controlled. We're just concerned. James, you're getting older. We're just looking out for you. Looking out for me, I repeated, the bitterness creeping into my voice. Is that what you're calling this? Looking out for me, I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back with a scrape against the floor. My mind was racing now, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a trap. Everything they had said, everything they had done, led to this moment. They didn't want reconciliation. They didn't want to rebuild our family. They wanted my business, my legacy. They wanted everything Margaret and I had built. And they were willing to manipulate me to get it. Ryan stood up too, his expression hardening. Dad, calm down. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help. But his words didn't reach me. I could hear the distant hum of the chandelier overhead, the clinking of silverware. But none of it mattered. My thoughts were too loud, too overwhelming. I had been blind, and now the truth was glaring at me. Impossible to ignore. A sharp, almost inaudible sound snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Emma's voice, low and measured. James, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. I turned to look at her, but something in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't concern. It wasn't care. It was something colder, something I hadn't seen before. She was controlling the conversation now, just like she had controlled the entire evening. No, I said firmly, my voice breaking through the tension. I'm done talking. I turned to walk toward the door, my footsteps loud against the marble floors. Behind me, I could hear Ryan and Emma's voices, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I needed to get out of there. The walls were closing in, the facade of a family dinner cracking, revealing the truth beneath it all. They weren't my family anymore. They were strangers. Strangers who were willing to go to any lengths to get what they wanted. But as I reached the door, I paused. There was a faint sound, too quiet, too subtle to be anything but intentional. It was the soft click of a phone. A text message sent. I turned around slowly, my eyes scanning the room. Ryan was standing by the bar, his phone in his hand, his back turned toward me. Emma was watching me closely, her face a perfect mask of concern. But there was something in Ryan's posture that made my blood run cold. The phone, the message, what had he just done? My hand instinctively reached for my phone in my pocket. The screen lit up with a new message. An unknown number flashing across the screen. My breath caught in my throat as I read the words, "Get out now. Don't trust them." My pulse quickened as I looked up, the weight of the message sinking in. My legs felt like lead as I took a step back. The house, Ryan's house. This house suddenly felt like a prison. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The words, "Don't trust them," echoed in my mind. And for the first time all evening, I knew that I had to leave. I turned toward the door. But Ryan spoke before I could move. "Dad, where are you going?" His voice was sharper now, demanding. But I didn't care. I didn't trust them anymore. "Goodbye, Ryan," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I'm leaving. I'll never trust you again." Before he could respond, I was out the door, the cool night air hitting my face as I walked down the path to the car. My heart was pounding, my mind a whirl of thoughts. Had they planned this all along? Had they been trying to manipulate me from the very beginning? I needed answers. I needed to understand the truth. And I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. As I reached the car, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I typed a message to the only person I knew I could trust, the one who had warned me. "It's happening. I need your help. Where are you?" I hit send. And then I waited, my eyes scanning the house behind me. The lights in the windows flickered, casting shadows on the walls. I could almost hear their voices, but now they were distant, fading into the night. I wasn't going back inside. Not now. Not ever. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter the cost. I stood frozen for a moment, my fingers still gripping the door handle of the car, my eyes glued to the front of Ryan's house. The cool night air felt like a balm against my heated skin, the coldness of reality settling in around me. Everything had changed in the span of a few minutes, and I knew that I could never go back. Not now. Not after what I had just learned. The message on my phone, the warning that had come out of nowhere, reverberated in my mind like an alarm. Get out now. Don't trust them. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had seen through their FOD, had been watching. Someone who knew exactly what was happening. Someone who had risked everything to warn me. And they weren't wrong. I couldn't trust Ryan. I couldn't trust Emma. Everything I had believed about them, about our family, had been a lie. I pulled myself together and slid into the car, my mind racing. The engine hummed to life, and the driver who had been patiently waiting for me outside turned toward me. His face was calm, professional, but I could see a flicker of concern in his eyes as he glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I wasn't sure how much I was showing, but the unease was impossible to hide. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled up the text again, rereading it. The words were still there, clear as day. Get out now. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was something deeper, something more sinister. I had been blind to it all. I had trusted my own son, my own flesh and blood, and I had allowed myself to believe that this dinner was a step toward reconciliation. But no, this was about something much darker. My fingers tightened around the edge of the seat as the car began to pull away from the curb. The house was already behind me, disappearing into the distance. But I wasn't running away from them. I wasn't running from the truth anymore. I was running toward it. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had happened. What was going on, and why I had been so blind to it all. As the car moved through the winding streets of Montclair, I began to replay everything that had happened that night, the way Ryan had been acting so strangely. The way Emma's questions had shifted from polite curiosity to something more insistent, more invasive. The constant probing about my business, about my future, about my retirement. It all made sense now. It was never about dinner. It was never about reconciliation. It was about getting control. The dinner had been a ruse, a carefully planned performance designed to lower my defenses, to make me feel safe, to make me trust them. And now I was paying the price. As the car continued on its way, I glanced down at my phone, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the incoming message. It was from the unknown number, the person who had warned me. You're not safe. They planned everything. The whiskey was spiked with zetrulum. It amplifies alcohol's effects, makes you suggestible, easy to manipulate. If you hadn't left, they would have gotten you to sign over the restaurant. My pulse quickened. The whiskey. That was what had felt off the entire evening. It was why I had felt dizzy, disoriented, why I had been so compliant. It wasn't just the food or the wine. It was the drug, the one that had been slipped into my drink to make me more susceptible. It all clicked together now, the way they had refilled my glass so often, the way they had seemed too eager, too insistent. They weren't trying to fix our family. They were trying to steal from me. I was grateful that I had trusted my instincts, grateful that I had left when I did, that I had gotten out before it was too late. But it was far from over. The feeling of betrayal gnawed at me, a pit in my stomach that only seemed to grow larger the more I thought about it. My son, my flesh and blood, And Emma, his wife, the woman he had chosen, both of them had been part of this. They had planned to steal everything Margaret and I had worked for. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to know who was behind it all, who was pulling the strings. And most importantly, I needed to find the person who had warned me. Whoever they were, they had saved my life tonight, and I owed them everything. Are you okay? Sir, the driver asked, breaking my reverie. His voice was calm, but there was a note of concern in it now. I realized I had been staring out the window, lost in thought, for longer than I had intended. I looked at him and nodded, trying to compose myself. I'm fine, I said, my voice a little shaky. Just drive. Keep going, he nodded, not pressing further, and I turned my attention back to the road ahead. The quiet hum of the car filled the space between us, but my mind was anything but quiet. The truth was unfolding before me in pieces. Like a jigsaw puzzle, I was desperately trying to put together, and the more I uncovered, the more terrifying it became. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. It was about control. They had been manipulating me, using me, for years, and I had never seen it. I had been blinded by my own hopes, by my desire to believe that our family could be whole again. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was far darker. As the car made its way back toward Brooklyn, I thought about what I needed to do next. First, I had to get my business in order. I had to secure everything before Ryan and Emma could do any more damage. The legal documents, they had likely prepared documents that could transfer everything I had built, had to be destroyed. And fast. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I needed a plan. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, dialing the only number that felt safe to me in this moment. The anonymous number, the person who had saved me tonight. It rang twice before someone picked up. Their voice was calm, neutral, but there was something reassuring about it. You called, the voice said, and I could feel the gravity of the moment settle in. I did, I said, my voice steady now, more determined than it had been all evening. You were right. They were trying to manipulate me. The whiskey, everything. I don't know what to do now. I'll help you, the voice replied, and there was a quiet confidence in those words that gave me hope. But you need to act quickly. They've already planned the next move. You can't let them win. Who's behind all this? I asked, my heart pounding as I awaited the answer. Who else is involved? The voice hesitated, just for a moment, before answering. You need to go to the police. You need to report everything. They've crossed a line. James, this isn't just about money anymore. It's about something far worse. You can't let them get away with it. I nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see me. I'm on my way to the station now, I said. I'll make sure everything is reported. Good. And James's there was a slight pause before the voice continued. Be careful. They'll be looking for you. I hung up the phone and sat back in the car, my hands gripping the seat. The reality of what I was about to do hit me all at once. Reporting my son to the police. Turning him in. I never thought I'd be in a position like this. But I knew it was the only way forward. The car slowed as we entered Brooklyn, the familiar sights of the city filling me with a strange sense of relief. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had to face the truth. I had to take action. I wasn't sure how it was all going to play out. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let Ryan and Emma get away with it. Not after everything they had done. Not after everything they had planned. And as I neared the police station, I could feel the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders. The truth would come out. The truth always does. And this time, I would make sure justice was served. The car came to a slow stop outside the police station, the flashing lights of the precinct casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. It was a strange contrast to the world I had just left, behind the manicured lawns of Montclair, the polished, perfect world Ryan and Emma had built, where nothing was ever as it seemed. Here, in the heart of Brooklyn, the grit and the reality of life were more palpable, more honest. I could almost taste the difference in the air as I stepped out of the car, the cool breeze brushing against my face. For a moment, I stood there, looking up at the towering building that loomed before me. It felt like a fortress, a place of judgment and consequence. And for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of that judgment. It wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about the dinner or the manipulation. It was about protecting everything I had left: my business, my legacy, and, most importantly, me dignity. The truth was, I wasn't sure what had hurt more, the betrayal I had suffered at the hands of my own flesh and blood, or the realization that I had been so blind to it all. I had trusted Ryan. I had loved him unconditionally. And now, I was faced with the ugly truth that the person I had raised, the person I thought I knew, had been planning to take everything from me. My trust had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if it was something I could ever rebuild. I pushed open the heavy doors of the precinct, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. The atmosphere inside was sterile, cold, and impersonal. There was no warmth here, no comfort, only the harsh reality of the law, of the consequences that awaited those who crossed the line. And in that moment, I realized that Ryan and Emma had crossed it. They had crossed it in ways I never could have imagined. A uniformed officer behind the front desk looked up as I approached. He didn't seem surprised to see me, as though he had been expecting someone like me to walk through the door. "Can I help you?" "Sir," the officer asked, his voice professional but lacking any real warmth. "I need to speak with someone about a case," I said, my voice steady but carrying an underlying tension. "It's about a family matter. My son and his wife." The officer raised an eyebrow, as if trying to gauge whether I was serious or just another concerned parent. But when he saw the expression on my face, he nodded and gestured for me to follow him. "Please take a seat." "Sire, I'll get someone to assist you." I sat down in the waiting area, my fingers drumming nervously on the armrest of the chair. The minutes stretched on as I waited, but in those moments, my mind was racing. The anonymous tip, the warning, the strange phone call that had shattered my perception of everything I thought I knew. Someone had saved me tonight. Someone had risked everything to help me, and I didn't even know who they were. The questions flooded my mind, but I knew I had no answers. Not yet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a detective walked over to me. He was a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor, his face hard and impassive. His name tag read Detective Harrison. He extended a hand, which I shook reluctantly. "Mr. Miller?" he asked, his tone clipped but polite. "Yes," I replied, my voice tight with anxiety. "I need to report something that's happened in my family. My son, Ryan, and his wife, Emma, they've been planning something against me. I need your help." Detective Harrison motioned for me to follow him to a small office at the back of the precinct. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered as we entered, and he gestured for me to sit across from his desk. I did, my hands still trembling as I sat down. "Tell me what happened." "Mr. to Miller," Detective Harrison said, his voice calm but authoritative. I took a deep breath. gathering my thoughts. This was it, the moment I had to lay everything on the line. I had to tell him everything. I had to trust him, even though I had trusted Ryan and Emma. And look where that had gotten me. They planned to steal everything from me. I began, my voice steady now. My son, Ryan, and his wife. Emma, they've been working together for months, planning to take over my restaurant. They've been trying to manipulate me, to make me sign documents that would transfer my business to them. They've been trying to get me to step down, to make me think it was for my own good. But it was all a lie. I paused, to my hands gripping the edge of the chair as I felt the weight of the words settle in my chest. And tonight, they went too far. They drugged my whiskey with a substance called zetrulum. It amplifies the effects of alcohol, makes you suggestible, makes you more willing to agree to things. They wanted me to sign the papers, to give up my business without even realizing what I was doing. But I didn't. I left before it was too late. Detective Harrison listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. This is a serious accusation. Mr. Miller, he said, his voice low. We'll need to verify everything you've told us. We'll need evidence. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I have the glass, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the one with the drug in it. I didn't drink it, but I can prove they were trying to poison me. I've got the bottle of whiskey. 2. It's all there. Everything they planned is in that glass. Detective Harrison gave me a sharp look. We'll need to get the lab to test it. Zetrulum is a rare substance, not something you just find at any corner store. If it's in that whiskey, it'll be easy to verify. But you're right. This is a very serious matter. If your son and his wife were trying to steal your business and poison you, they could be facing a long time in prison. I could feel the weight of his words settling over me. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. I had never imagined I would be sitting here, reporting my own son to the police. But the truth was, I had no choice. I had to protect myself. I had to protect the legacy Margaret and I had built together. I don't know what to do now, I said quietly. I thought I knew them. I thought I understood my own son. But now, I don't know who he is anymore. He's not the boy I raised. He's not the man I thought he would be. Detective Harrison's gaze softened. Just for a moment. It's never easy. Mr. Miller, family can be the most dangerous when things go wrong. But you did the right thing coming here. You're not alone in this. We'll investigate and get to the bottom of it. I nodded, grateful for his reassurance. But the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. The truth had already shattered the illusions I had about my son and his wife. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces. I had trusted them, loved them, and they had betrayed me in ways I never could have imagined. Detective Harrison stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. We'll need you to come down to the station again to give a full statement. Mr. Miller, we'll also need any documents, the whiskey bottle, and the glass you mentioned. I'll make sure we get everything processed as quickly as possible. I stood up, my knees shaky, but there was a sense of purpose in my step now. Thank you, I said quietly. I just want this over. I want to know the truth. I understand, he said, his voice firm. We'll make sure the truth comes out. As I walked out of the precinct, I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. The police would handle the investigation, but I knew it was far from over. Ryan and Emma had underestimated me. They thought they could manipulate me, control me, but they had miscalculated. I would fight back. I would make sure justice was served. I didn't know how long it would take to uncover all the lies. But one thing was clear: I wouldn't stop until I had the answers, until I had reclaimed everything they tried to steal from me. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The morning after I left the police station was the first time in months that I had felt any semblance of clarity. As I sat in the quiet of my living room, my mind still heavy with the weight of the truth, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led up to this point. I had spent so much time suppressing my suspicions, letting years of silence and anger cloud my judgment. But now, in the stark light of reality, the pieces were falling into place. Ryan, Emma, the betrayal, the plan to steal my business, to poison me, to strip away everything Margaret and I had worked so hard to build. The whole thing felt like a nightmare, like a dark shadow that had followed me for so long. And now, finally, I was facing it head on. There was no escaping it now. I had been to the police, reported everything I knew, and provided them with the evidence. The whiskey bottle, the glass, the substance that had been slipped into my drink, everything was in their hands. Now, they assured me they would investigate, that they would get to the bottom of it. But even as I sat there, waiting for them to take action, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The phone buzzed on the coffee table in front of me, breaking my thoughts. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Ryan. It had called me twice last night, and I had ignored both calls. I wasn't ready to speak to him. I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. He had already betrayed me once. What could he possibly say now that would change anything? I picked up the phone and glanced at the screen, my heart sinking when I saw the text message notification. Dad, please. We need to talk. I don't know what you think is going on, but you're wrong. I never wanted this. He just made a mistake. I read the message over and over, each word burning into my mind. I never wanted this. How many times had I heard that before? How many times had Ryan said he had made a mistake, only to turn around and do something worse? This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. This was deliberate. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I didn't know how to. What was I supposed to say? What could I possibly say to my son, the one I had raised, who had now turned into a man who would betray me for his own gain? The phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't Ryan. It was a number I didn't recognize. An unknown caller. My stomach tightened, and I hesitated before answering. It could be the police, or it could be something worse. But the thought of letting it go to voicemail, of leaving something unanswered, left me with a gnawing feeling. I had to know. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it nonetheless. Mr. Miller. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and unfamiliar. This is Detective Harrison. We need you to come down to the station. We've uncovered some new information regarding your son and his wife. You need to hear this. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. New information. I had thought I knew everything. He had given my statement, provided the evidence, but there was more that I didn't know, more that I wasn't ready to face. Of course, I said, my voice strained. I'll be there. 0. The drive to the police station felt different this time. The quiet hum of the car was no longer just a background noise. It was a reminder that I was stepping into something much bigger than myself. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat reminding me that I was still reeling from the shock of the previous night. I had barely slept, my mind constantly racing, unable to settle on anything for more than a few moments. As I pulled into the parking lot of the precinct, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. The unknown had always been a source of fear for me. And now, as I walked through the door, I realized that the unknown was standing in front of me, demanding to be faced. The truth, whatever it was waiting for me. Detective Harrison was waiting for me when I entered the lobby. His face was serious, his brow furrowed, as if he had been expecting me for some time. Without saying a word, he motioned for me to follow him down the narrow hallway and into the same small office where we had spoken before. "Take a seat, Mr. Miller," he said, his tone more grave than before. "We've got some things to discuss." I sat down, my legs feeling weak beneath me. My mind was racing again. What had they uncovered? What was this new information? I had done everything right. I had given them the evidence. I had reported everything I knew. What could possibly be left to discover? Detective Harrison didn't waste any time. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the desk, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me uneasy. "Mr. Miller, we found something that complicates the situation," he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "We've been going through the financial records, the bank statements, everything that connects your son and his wife to the businesses. And there's something you need to know." I felt my stomach drop. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. I could barely breathe. What had they found? What had Ryan and Emma done now? "We've traced a series of large, unexplained withdrawals from your accounts," Detective Harrison continued, his voice low. "Significant sums of money have been moved over the past few months. And it all leads back to your son. We also found connections to a known criminal network, people who have been involved in high-stakes gambling, money laundering, and even organized crime." I sat back in the chair, my mind reeling. I had suspected that something wasn't right. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Your son and his wife weren't just trying to steal from you. "Mr. Miller," Detective Harrison said, his voice quiet but filled with meaning. "They've been using your business as a front for their illegal activities. And it gets worse. They've been funneling money through your accounts, trying to hide their tracks." I felt my pulse quicken, my hands clenching into fists, as the reality of it all sank in. Ryan had been involved in something far darker than I had ever imagined. The man I had raised, the son I had trusted, was not only trying to steal from me, he was part of something far more dangerous. Something that could ruin not just him, but everyone around him. "We're in the process of securing the rest of the evidence," Detective Harrison said, his voice grave. "But it's clear that your son and his wife have been planning this for a long time. They were working with others, people who could do a lot more than just ruin your business. We're talking about organized crime." "Mr. Miller," I felt my heart racing in my chest as the words sank in. Organized crime. Ryan had been involved with people who could destroy lives, people who didn't care about family, about loyalty. They only cared about money. "Do you have any idea how deep this goes?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain calm. Detective Harrison paused for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. "We're still piecing everything together. But we have reason to believe that Ryan and Emma were in over their heads. They were desperate." "Mr. Miller?" "Desperate enough to do anything to keep their scheme from falling apart. That's why they resorted to poisoning you. They knew you wouldn't sign those papers unless they manipulated you. They were trying to force you into giving them control." I felt sick to my stomach. I had been so blind. All those years of love, 2 of trying to keep our family together. Had it all been a lie? Had Ryan's entire life been a performance? A fraud to mask his true intentions? "Where does this leave me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do I do now?" You protect yourself, Detective Harrison said, his voice firm. You need to make sure that everything is secure. Your business, your finances, your future. We'll be investigating further, and we'll make sure your son and his wife face the full consequences of their actions. But you need to act fast. I nodded, the weight of it all sinking in. I was about to lose my son, not just because of his betrayal, but because of his involvement in something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I had trusted him. I had loved him. And now I had to let go. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let them win. Not after everything they had tried to take from me. I was going to fight. For Margaret, for my legacy, for myself. The next few hours were a blur. I gave the detective all the information I could, including the bank records, the documents Ryan had tried to manipulate me into signing, and the evidence of the poisoning. It was enough to get the investigation moving in the right direction. As I left the police station, I felt the full weight of the situation pressing down on me. The betrayal was devastating. The danger was real. But I wasn't alone. I had people in my corner now, Detective Harrison, the police, and even Maria, the housekeeper who had warned me in the first place. She had seen the truth when I hadn't. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild, a chance to reclaim what was mine, and a chance to finally find peace. But the battle was far from over. I knew that now. The following days were a blur of emotions, decisions, and an unrelenting drive to find some form of resolution. The weight of everything I had learned hung over me, a constant presence in the back of my mind. Ryan and Emma's betrayal, their involvement in something much darker than I had ever imagined, had shattered my world. But now, I had a choice to make, a choice between what was right and what I wanted to believe about my own family. The line between justice and family had never been so thin. And for the first time, I wasn't sure where it ended and where my obligations as a father began. After the police had gathered all the necessary evidence, they had briefed me on their next steps. They assured me that they would continue to investigate the financial transactions, the connections to organized crime, and the attempts to manipulate and poison me. It was clear that Ryan and Emma were deeper into this than I could have ever imagined. But the thing that stuck with me, the thing that gnawed at my soul, was the question I could never shake. Could I really turn my own son in? I had spent years trying to protect him, to be there for him, even when I didn't fully understand him. And yet, here he was, on the other side of the law, involved in something that could destroy not just his future, but the lives of everyone he had touched. My heart ached at the thought of it. But the truth was undeniable. Ryan had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. The law had to take its course. No matter how much it tore me apart, I spent the night pacing in my apartment, wrestling with myself. There was no going back, even if I wanted to, even if I wished it more than anything. There was no undoing what had been done. I was no longer just a father trying to keep his family together. I was a man standing at the crossroads of justice and personal loyalty, and the road ahead was fraught with peril. As dawn broke, I found myself staring out the window of my apartment, watching the world wake up. The streets below were busy, just as they always were. Cars passed by. People hustled to work, and life went on. But for me, life had stopped. My world had been upended, and I wasn't sure how to move forward. The truth had come out. I had seen my son for who he really was, and it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. The decisions I made now would shape not just my future, but Ryan's, Emma's, and everyone who had been affected by their actions. At around noon, My phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was Ryan. He had been calling me every day since the night I left their house. Each time trying to explain, trying to convince me that things weren't as they seemed. But I wasn't fooled anymore. The man on the other end of the line wasn't my son. He was a stranger who had used me, manipulated me, and tried to destroy everything I had worked for. I hesitated for a moment before answering. My thumb hovered over the screen, and I felt a momentary surge of anger, but I couldn't ignore him. I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. If I was going to make this right, I needed to hear what he had to say. For the first time, I wasn't just his father. I was a man who had been wronged, and it was time for him to face the consequences. "Hello," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Dad." Ryan's voice was filled with an urgency I hadn't heard before. "Dad, please. We need to talk. You don't understand. Everything I did. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen." I could feel the lie in his words, but I let him continue. "Ryan, I don't want to hear excuses," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "You've already done enough. I'm done listening to you try to justify what you did. You betrayed me. You tried to poison me. You tried to take everything I've worked for, everything your mother and I built together." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Ryan breathing, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. I thought he might beg me for forgiveness, as he had done so many times before when he'd messed up. But this time, I didn't want to hear it. I wasn't going to forgive him. Not this time. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Ryan finally said, his voice cracking. "I was desperate. You don't understand. Emma and I, we got involved with some bad people. Things got out of hand. But I swear, Dad, I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I got here. You got here because you chose to. You chose to lie. You chose to betray me. And now you're going to pay for it," I said, my voice steady, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. I had never imagined I would say something like this to my own son. "Dad, please," Ryan said, his voice pleading. "I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll turn myself in. I'll cooperate with the police. Just please, don't let this be the end." His words were like a knife twisting in my chest. I could hear the desperation in his voice. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo what he had done. I had spent too many years letting him make mistakes, letting him off the hook when he messed up. But this was different. This was beyond redemption. I had to stop enabling him. I had to stop pretending that everything would be okay if I just forgave him one more time. "You've crossed a line, Ryan," I said, my voice firm. "There's no going back from this. I'm not your safety net anymore. You're on your own." "Dad? No. Please," he pleaded again. But this time, there was no passion in his voice. There was no anger. No resolve. Just defeat. "Please, don't do this to me. Don't make me lose everything." "I'm not making you lose anything," I replied, my heart breaking at the sound of his voice. "You've made your own choices. Ryan, you've chosen this path, and now you have to face the consequences." I ended the call before he could respond. I didn't want to hear any more. I had heard enough. The reality of what was happening sank in. My son, my flesh and blood, had chosen greed and deception over family. And as much as it tore me apart, I knew I couldn't protect him from the consequences any longer. He had to face them. He had to be held accountable for what he had done. I sat in silence for a few moments after the call ended, the weight of the decision I had just made sinking into my bones. The man who had once been my son, the boy I had raised and loved, was gone. He had become someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize, someone I could no longer trust. But I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had been wronged, and it was time for me to stand up for myself. I had spent too many years trying to make things right for him. I had spent too many years excusing his behavior, letting him off the hook. But now, I had to protect myself. I had to protect what remained of my life. It was time to face the consequences. For Ryan, that was it. For Emma, for me, it was time to go to the police and make sure they were held accountable. It was time to stop pretending that everything was going to be okay. I stood up from my chair, my heart heavy, but my resolve firm. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let my family's betrayal destroy me. I would stand tall, face the truth, and make sure justice was served. I was done being a victim. I was done being silent. It was time to make things right. For good. The air in the police station was cold and sterile. Each fluorescent light buzzing overhead as if it had a purpose, as if it was waiting for something to happen. I had been here before, sitting in the same uncomfortable chair, feeling the weight of the decision I had to make. But today was different. Today, everything was real. There would be no turning back. I could already hear Ryan's voice in my head, his desperate pleas echoing, "Don't do this to me. Don't make me lose everything." But it was too late. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to save him this time. I wasn't going to be the one to protect him from the consequences of his actions. Not anymore. I looked at Detective Harrison as he entered the room, his face still hard, but with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. He knew what this was. He knew what I was about to do. This wasn't just another case. It was family. And when family betrays you in the way Ryan had, there's no going back. "Mr. Miller," Detective Harrison said, pulling up a chair and sitting down across from me. "We've got everything we need to proceed. We've secured the evidence from the whiskey, and we're moving forward with the case. The financial records are clear, and the connections to organized crime are damning. I've been briefed on your son's involvement, and we're taking action." I nodded, though it felt like my throat was closing up. My son, my flesh and blood, how did it come to this? How did the man I raised, the boy I had watched grow up with such hope, turn into someone so cold, so ruthless? "Thank you, Detective," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "I don't know what else I can add. I've told you everything I know. I've given you the evidence. I'm just trying to process all of this." Detective Harrison gave me a knowing look. "I understand. This isn't easy. I've seen it before, family turning on. Family? Betrayal in its most painful form. But you did the right thing. You protected yourself. And that's what matters." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was the right thing to do, that turning my son in was somehow justified. But in my heart, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if I could ever come to terms with what was happening. My son had tried to destroy me. He had tried to poison me, to take away everything Margaret and I had worked for. But he was still my son, and that made this betrayal feel like 1,000 cuts to my soul. The door to the office opened, and a uniformed officer stepped in, handing Detective Harrison a file. "We've got the latest from the lab," the officer said. "The substance in the whiskey has been confirmed as zetrulum, just like we suspected. The analysis also confirmed traces of it in Mr. W. Miller's glass. This was an intentional act. The amount of the drug was enough to incapacitate him completely. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of those words settling over me. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just some isolated incident. They had planned this. They had gone to great lengths to ensure that I would be too vulnerable, too susceptible to resist their manipulation. The thought made my stomach turn. How could Ryan, my son, do this to me? Is there any doubt left? I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. No doubt, Detective Harrison said firmly. Your son and his wife planned this carefully. Mr. Miller. They knew exactly what they were doing. I let out a long breath, the air in the room suddenly feeling thin. My world, everything I thought I knew, was falling apart around me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but I didn't. I just sat there, my hands gripping the armrests, my knuckles turning white. The next step is to arrest Ryan and Emma. Detective Harrison continued. We've gathered enough evidence to charge them with attempted poisoning, fraud, and conspiracy. They'll be arrested today, but I need you to come with us. Mr. Miller, we need you to be there when we confront them. We need your statement in person. I nodded, though it felt like my mind had gone numb. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, pain, relief. The emotions were so tangled up. I couldn't even identify them clearly. But one thing was certain, I had to see this through. I couldn't back down now. For too long, I had allowed myself to be manipulated by Ryan's lies, by his promises. But no more. This time, I was going to stand firm. The drive to Ryan's house felt like an eternity. The streets outside the police car blurred past. But my thoughts remained frozen on what awaited me at the end of the journey. I was about to confront my son, to watch as the consequences of his actions came crashing down around him. And yet, I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. How could I face him? How could I look him in the eye after everything he had done? The car pulled up in front of Ryan's house. The grand, imposing mansion that had been the backdrop of so many memories, good ones and bad ones. I had always admired it from a distance, thinking of how far Ryan had come, how much he had achieved. But now, looking at it, all I saw was a symbol of everything he had taken from me. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like lead, and walked toward the front door. The police officers followed behind me, to their presence, a reminder that this was no longer just a family matter. This was a criminal investigation. This was real. As we approached the door, I couldn't help but feel a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe that this was just a misunderstanding, that Ryan hadn't really meant to do this. But another part of me, the part that had watched his every move, the part that had seen the way he had manipulated me over the years, knew that this was no mistake. This was who Ryan had become, and I had to face that truth, no matter how much it hurt. Ryan opened the door before we even had a chance to ring the bell. He was standing there, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. When he saw the police officers behind me, I could see the panic in his eyes, the way his body stiffened, as if he were trying to prepare himself for what was coming. But there was no preparation for this. There was no getting ready for the truth. Dad, he asked, his voice trembling. What is this? What's going on? I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. I just stared at him, my heart breaking all over again. This was my son. This was the boy I had raised, the boy who had once looked up to me with admiration and love. But now, I saw nothing but a man who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Ryan Miller, one of the officers said, stepping forward, his voice commanding. You are under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Ryan's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing as if he were trying to find the words. But none came. His eyes flicked to me, and I could see the desperation in them. The fear. It was a look I had never seen before, and it made my heart ache in a way I didn't expect. "Dad," Ryan whispered, taking a step toward me. "Please. You have to understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just trying to fix things. Please, don't let them do this. Please don't let them take me away." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried too many times over the years, over things I couldn't control. But this was different. This was the moment I had to make a choice. A choice that would define everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped for. "I don't know you anymore." "Ryan," I said, my voice cracking, "you're not the son I raised. You're not the man I thought you were. I can't protect you anymore. You have to face the consequences." The officers moved quickly, handcuffing Ryan and escorting him out the door. Emma, who had been standing silently behind him, now stepped forward, her face pale and twisted in fear. She didn't even look at me as the officers took her into custody, her hands trembling as she was led away. As the police car pulled away from the house, I stood there, frozen in place, watching the two people I once called family disappear into the night. I had done it. I had faced the truth. I had taken the hardest step of my life. And in that moment, as I stood there alone in front of the house, I realized that I had made the right choice. The pain would never fully go away, but I had done what needed to be done. And that, for better or worse, was the only thing I could control. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had taken the first step toward healing, not just for me, but for the legacy Margaret and I had built together, and that was a victory in itself. The days following the arrests were a whirlwind. The sense of relief that I thought would come with finally making the right choice, the right call, never really arrived. Instead, what replaced it was an overwhelming feeling of emptiness, a hollow ache that seemed to grow with each passing hour. Yes, I had done what needed to be done. Yes, I had ensured that Ryan and Emma faced the consequences of their actions. But the cost of it all, the loss of family, the devastation of seeing my own son taken away in handcuffs, it was a price I wasn't sure I was ready to pay. I spent the first few days in a kind of numb daze, going through the motions of daily life as if on autopilot. I went to work, made phone calls, attended meetings. But all the while, my mind kept drifting back to the same question. Is this the legacy I wanted to leave behind? I had built my life, my business, with integrity. Margaret and I had worked hard to create something meaningful, something that could be passed down to future generations. And now, I was standing on the precipice of that legacy, watching it crumble beneath my feet. The betrayal by my own flesh and blood had shattered everything. I could still hear Ryan's voice in my head, that pleading desperation as the officers took him away. "Dad, please, you don't understand. I never wanted this." The words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake them. I couldn't forget the look on his face as he realized that there was no way out of this, that I, the father who had always stood by him, had finally drawn a line. He couldn't cross, but the truth was, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how a son could do this to his father, how someone who was supposed to be your family could betray you in such a cold, calculated way. It was something I would never fully comprehend. The police had gathered all the evidence, the financial records, the communications, the plans they had drawn up, The zetrulum in the whiskey, there was no denying it. They had tried to poison me, to take everything I had worked for. And it was clear that Ryan and Emma had been involved in something far bigger than I had realized. But even with all the evidence, all the proof, I still found myself grappling with the question of whether or not I had done the right thing. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that made everything feel heavier. More permanent. Margaret's absence was like a shadow that never left. The little things she used to do, organizing the kitchen, placing fresh flowers on the dining table, her humming while she cooked, were all gone now. The house felt empty, as if it had lost its soul. I wandered through the rooms, touching things that she had left behind. A photo of us at our wedding, her favorite book still lying on the shelf, the perfume bottle she had kept for years. I hadn't touched these things in months, hadn't allowed myself to linger on the memories. But now, with everything that had happened, it felt like the right time to confront the past, to face the reality of what had been lost. 2 weeks after the arrests, I found myself sitting in the same chair I had sat in before the chair where I had spent so many quiet evenings, reading the newspaper, watching the news, reflecting on the life Margaret and I had built. But now, it was just me, and the weight of everything that had transpired. I had received updates from the police. Ryan and Emma were both facing serious charges: attempted poisoning, conspiracy, infraud, and elder abuse. The trial was set to begin soon, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. I had done everything I could. I had handed over the documents, the phone records, the financial statements. I had told the truth, even when it hurt. And now, it was up to the courts to decide their fate. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder, what now? What did the future hold for me? I had spent so many years focused on providing for my family, building my business, that I had neglected the one thing that mattered most, the people in my life. I had neglected Ryan. I had neglected my own heart. And now, everything was different. My world had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure how to rebuild it. That was when the phone rang. I picked it up, half expecting it to be another police update, another formality. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart stopped. It was Maria, the housekeeper, the woman who had saved me that night, the one who had risked everything to warn me about Ryan and Emma's plan. Mr. Miller, Maria's voice came through the phone, soft but filled with concern. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to check in. I know everything's been difficult, but I wanted to make sure you're okay. I sat up a little straighter in my chair. I'm fine, Maria, or at least, I'm getting there, but it's been hard. You know, I've been trying to process everything that's happened. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. I never thought my own son would do this to me. Maria was silent for a moment, and I could hear the sympathy in her voice when she finally spoke again. I know. Mr. Miller, I know, but you're stronger than you think. You've made it through so much. And you're not alone. You have people who care about you. I care about you. I was taken aback by her words. In the midst of everything that had happened, I had forgotten that there were still people who cared, people who hadn't abandoned me. Maria had seen the worst of it all, yet she was still here, reaching out to me, offering her support. Thank you, Maria, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved my life. You know that I did what anyone would do. Mr. Miller, she replied gently, but you've saved yourself. You've made the hard choices, the right choices, And that's what matters. I sat there, letting her words sink in. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't about what had been taken from me, but about what I still had. I still had my integrity. I still had my ability to make things right. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all I needed to rebuild. As the trial drew closer, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The weight that had been on my shoulders began to lift, little by little. I had done what needed to be done. I had confronted the truth. And now it was time for the world to see it for what it was. Ryan and Emma would face the consequences of their actions. But that didn't mean I had to carry the burden of their betrayal any longer. I decided to focus on the things that really mattered. I reached out to old friends, people I had neglected over the years, and began to rebuild the relationships I had lost in my obsession with work. I visited Maria at her new job at one of my restaurants, offering her a position with better pay and benefits. She had proven her loyalty, and I wanted to show her that I appreciated everything she had done for me. And slowly, bit by bit, I started to feel like myself again. The process of healing wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had to learn how to forgive myself for letting things go so far. I had to learn how to let go of the anger, the bitterness, and the regret. And most of all, I had to learn how to move forward. To those of you reading this, I want to leave you with a simple truth sometimes. The hardest thing you can do is face the truth. Sometimes, the people you love the most will hurt you, the deepest. But it's not about what they do to you. It's about what you do for yourself. It's about choosing to stand up, to do what's right, even when it's the hardest choice you've ever made. If you find yourself in a situation where you're being manipulated, betrayed, or hurt by someone you love, don't stay silent. Don't let fear keep you from standing up for yourself. You have the power to change your life, to choose your future. And if you're in a place where you need to rebuild, remember this: it's never too late to start again. I've learned that it's okay to let go of the past. It's okay to walk away from toxic relationships. And most importantly, it's okay to choose yourself. So, to anyone out there who needs to hear this, take the first step. Take the hard step. Speak your truth. And if you've been hurt, you know that you don't have to carry that pain forever. You have the power to heal. If you found this story impactful, make sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share this with someone who might need it today. Your support helps us grow, and we appreciate every one of you for being here.